Hi class, today we're going to be talking about chapter 13, section 1, the general and the woman pharaoh from Story of the World. Also got a little life update for you, so if you want to watch that, it's at the end of the video. So in this video, we're going to be reviewing chapter 13, section 1, talking about the new kingdom of Egypt, Thutmose I, Hatshepsut, and Thutmose III. Now, a little side note before we get started, Story of the World section 1 covers Thutmose I and Hatshepsut, but I'm adding Thutmose III in there because he's very interesting, and also you're reading Mara right now, and Mara is about Hatshepsut and Thutmose III, and so I thought it would be very relevant to talk about him further. So let's start with your chapter 13, section 1 review. So the general and the woman pharaoh. So in this chapter, you read about the new kingdom of Egypt and how it's called the golden age of Egypt. Now, I know that the fourth dynasty is called that as well, but both times were, again, very, very prosperous. Egypt becomes more and more powerful, and there are many pharaohs to keep the new kingdom strong. In this chapter, you read about two different pharaohs, and the first one you read about is Thutmose I. He is a general in the army, and he helps drive out the Hyksos. Now, remember, the Hyksos were Western Semitic people. They settle in Egypt, and when they see an opportunity, they take over and they rule, and that starts the second intermediate period until almost drives them out. Now, Thutmose I marries Pharaoh's daughter. He became Pharaoh in 1524 BC, and some of his conquests were in Nubia, the Hyksos in Canaan, and he also conquers land up to the Euphrates River, although he doesn't fight the Babylonians. His legacy is that he makes Egypt twice as large as it had been. Now, the other pharaoh you read about is Hatshepsut, the woman who pretended to be a man. She is a princess of Thutmose, the one we just talked about, and she really wanted to be the pharaoh. Her brother becomes the pharaoh, however, and he's very sick, and so he dies. And the new pharaoh is really, really young, and so she rules for him. And when this young pharaoh grows up, she refuses to give him the throne. She says that Amun-Ra told her that she would rule, and she, in order to show that she is the rightful pharaoh, pretends to be a man, dresses to be a man, and holds that authority over people. Her legacy is that she ruled for 20 years, and she led expeditions into Africa, and she builds more monuments than any other Egyptian queen. So let's talk about the new kingdom of Egypt, 1570 to 1070 BC, and we're just going to have just a brief overview talking about some of the characteristics of this time period. So just to review a little bit first, we came from the middle kingdom of Egypt, where we had kind of flourishing in art and literature, focusing in on the common people, everyday human life, things like that. The middle kingdom of Egypt covers the 11th and 12th dynasties, and it ends with the Hyksos taking over. The second intermediate period is when the Hyksos conquered the 13th and 14th dynasties. They begin the 15th dynasty, eventually almost conquers them, and begins the new kingdom of Egypt, starting with the 18th dynasty. So here's kind of an overview. So Egypt during this time is very imperialistic. It becomes an empire, and it extends its reach beyond its former borders, as you can see in this map. It's the most popular era in Egyptian history, meaning that the pharaohs that you guys might know about or more familiar with are probably from this time period. It's the most completely documented period that we have. Literacy is expanding during this time. A lot of people are writing letters and things like that that they hadn't been doing before, and so you just have a lot more text to work with. During this time, the priests of Amun were gaining power. So the power of the pharaoh begins to diminish as the priests of Amun gain wealth and influence. There are 80,000 priests just at the Temple of Thebes alone, and some priests were richer and owned more land than the Pharaoh, which to me is surprising to learn, because you think about the Pharaoh as being obviously like the richest person in all of Egypt. He's the most powerful. He must have the most land, the most money, but not during this time. The priests became very, very powerful to the point where, if you look at my side note, the new kingdom of Egypt ends because the priests of Amun grew stronger than the Pharaoh and divided the country between their rule and the Pharaoh's rule. And that's how the new kingdom ends. We're not talking about that today, but I just want you to keep that in your minds. So let's talk about Thutmose I, the general. So after Ahmose, so remember, Ahmose is the one who begins the the new kingdom of Egypt. He's the one that expels the Hyksos. Remember, his mom was Queen Hotep. His brother was Kamose, the one that tried to seek revenge on his father, but dies. And then his mom, the queen, helps drive out the Hyksos. So when he takes over, it's a little bit easier for him to do so. So Ahmose starts the new kingdom of Egypt. When he dies, Amenhotep I, his sons, takes over. He's able at this time to regain control over the Nubians. Remember, during the second intermediate period, the Nubians were acting as an independent country. Egypt did not have the power to be able to wield their influence and control the Nubians. So Amenhotep I is able to take that back. He is, however, childless, and so Thutmose I, who is a general in his army, is appointed pharaoh. He's obviously not part of the royal family, and so this is a break in tradition, and he rules for 6 years, so not a very long time. So in his 6 years that he rules, he campaigns to Nubia. Again, you read this in your chapter. And one of the more famous things that he did in Nubia is that he kills the king and he hangs him from his ship to show everyone who is in control. So he expands the borders in Nubia more than before. In the north, he campaigns in Palestine and in Syria. And he also builds some buildings. So he builds at the Temple of Karnak in Thebes, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And his tomb is in the Valley of Kings, and he's the first one to do this. We're going to talk about the Valley of Kings when we talk about King Tut in the next video. So the Karnak Temple Complex, I mentioned this when we talked about the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, but I was like, we'll talk about it later. So this is when we're talking about it. So the Karnak Temple Complex is a complex where construction began in the Middle Kingdom into the New Kingdom, and then it continued afterwards. I think I said something like 30 pharaohs worked on this for over 1,300 years. And so it was just this place that all of these pharaohs went and they built all of these things. It's really cool. The Temple of Amun is here, and it is the largest religious site in the world. Okay, remember we just said the priests of Amun were very rich and very powerful, so it kind of makes sense that they had the largest religious site in the world, or could build that. The Karnak Temple Complex covers 200 acres, and it was in constant use for 2,000 years, and it is considered one of the most sacred places in Egypt. And here are some pictures for you. If you want to see more pictures, I'm going to put this link below. It's really cool. It's a 3D view of the temple. You can play around with it for a little while, but you can click on like the different places of the temple, and then you can have like a huge 3D view of it. So yeah, if you're interested, check it out. So let's talk about Hatshepsut, the woman pharaoh. So I want to give you a little bit of context of how she came to the throne. So remember, we have Ahmose, Amenhotep, and then Thutmose I, not related at all, the general becoming king. So let's see what he did. And I brought some of my son's stuffed animals to help us out a little bit. So we're going to say that this cute little teddy bear is, hi, this is Thutmose I. So he marries twice, and we're just going to say, here's a duck. and here's a raccoon. This might be a little bit complicated. So Thutmose is going to sit on my lap, okay? So these are his two wives. So this is his royal wife. This is Amenhotep's sister, the daughter of Ahmose. So Ahmose, again, the one who expels the Hyksos, he marries his daughter, so like a prominent princess. And this royal wife has 2 sons and 2 daughters, so 4 kids. The lesser wife has 1 son. So he appointed the 2 sons of the royal wife as heirs, and they both died. Okay, this is obviously the princess, but her 2 sons died before Thutmose I dies. So then he's just like, hey, lesser wife, I'm going to appoint your son, Thutmose II, to be the heir. Okay, so we're going to work with sons for a second. So here is the lesser wife. Here's Thutmose II. And he says, hey, Thutmose II, you get to be king even though you're the lesser wife's son. And in order to kind of up your status, you get to marry one of the royal wife's daughters, Hatshepsut. So they get married, and so Thutmose II and Princess Hatshepsut get married. So they are half siblings, okay? Thutmose II had a lot of health issues, and Hatshepsut, I don't know what their relationship was like. I don't think it was very good, guys. So she's just like, oh, you're sick, I will help you. So she eagerly takes over his duties, and she is named co-ruler from the very beginning. So way to step on a man's pride. She is like the one who's just like, oh, you're sick, you can't do that. Well, like, you just rest in bed. Like, I'll do it for you. And they only have 1 child, and this 1 child is a daughter. So Thutmose II, another reason why I don't think their relationship was very good, is Thutmose II spends a considerable amount of his time with a woman named Iset. And Thutmose II and Iset have a son, Thutmose III. I don't have another animal, or I would use it for him, sorry. So Thutmose III, and he immediately is just like, rejoice, I have a son, you will be my heir. And Thutmose III is named the heir. This is pretty much just an insult to Hatshepsut. It's just like a slap in her face. And Thutmose is, again, he's sick, so he dies at the age of 35 when Thutmose III is still a little kid. He is still a child. So Hatshepsut is just like, mwahaha, my time has come. So she immediately claims the right to rule as the child's aunt and stepmother. So for the first few years, you see these statues show her standing behind Thutmose III in the supporting motherly role. But in 1500 BC, she builds this huge mortuary temple, a place of worship, and she commissions these engravings, and Thutmose I is ordering her to be crowned pharaoh in this engraving. Now we know this didn't happen, but she's trying to change history, trying to make people believe that she is the rightful heir, the rightful pharaoh on the throne. So she orders this drawing, this engraving, where excuse me, Thutmose I, the guy who expanded Egypt to twice the size, is saying, you, my daughter, be the pharaoh. And again, this shows that she had the right to rule all of Egypt. She also then convinces powerful court officials of her right to rule. She dresses as a man. She wears a royal headdress and this formal square beard. And she also sends Thutmose that should say Thutmose III. She also sends Thutmose III away to fight campaigns in northern Egypt, and she probably was like, I hope he dies in battle. I hope that I just keep getting to rule even when he's old enough. I mean, he's old enough to be in an army, so he's probably old enough to be the pharaoh at this point. However, she's just like, shoo, away with you, go fight, maybe die. Anyway, so she dies after 21 years of ruling. She doesn't have any great military victories. Her army does not have great victories. However, her legacy is that she was one of the most powerful and successful pharaohs of the New Kingdom. Now, I want you to think about this. She's not just like, oh, I would like to try to rule. I did it. No, she wasn't just like, she didn't just rule, she ruled really well. And I guess like in order to convince people that you were the rightful heir and to show that you were powerful, you probably had to just be really, really powerful. So it probably would then follow that you would be a successful pharaoh. She had more building projects than any other ruler in Egyptian history, except for Ramses the Great, who we're not going to talk about right now. But she was quite the lady. Moving on to Thutmose III. So Susan Wise Bauer says there is no direct evidence that Thutmose III was involved in Hatshepsut's death. Now I like that she has to even clarify and say this, because most people would think like, did you kill her? Because it doesn't justify it, but it would make sense if, you know, you did. But just after her death, Thutmose III returned from the front and began a savage wiping away of his stepmother's name. So he's angry. Her titles were scraped off every monument he could find. The reliefs showing her divine appointment were smashed. He had her statues thrown into a new nearby quarry. Hatshepsut had ordered sunward pointing obelisks built in honor of Amun. Thutmose III did not smash these, perhaps fearing the god's wrath, but he had walls built around them so that they could not be seen. He was 30 years old, and it was long past time for him to get to work. So his stepmother/aunt had been ruling in his place for 20 years. And I guess if you were like a 10-year-old, you'd be like, okay, that's fine. But like as you're getting to 18 and then 20 and then 25 and then 30, you're like, he doesn't have enough power. Like his stepmom has taken all of this power away from him, and he is powerless and helpless to do anything. So when he gets that power, he is probably so, I don't know, just so angry that he just smashes everything. And I'm going to ask you a question that you're going to write in your notes, or you're going to answer in your notes. So Thutmose III had been king for 21 years, but not able to do anything. How would you have felt if you were Thutmose III? What would you have done during your reign to make up for lost time? Answer that. You can pause it and do it now or do it later, but make sure you answer that. Incomplete sentences in your notes. So Thutmose III is known as the Napoleon of Egypt because he was so intense. He is so anti-Hatshepsut. So she had no major military victories again during her 20 years of ruling. So this is where Thutmose focused. Okay, so I know that in Story of the World you read that Thutmose I had all of these campaigns and expanded Egypt, and he did. However, Thutmose III is the one who is known as expanding Egypt to its greatest extent. He is just intense in his military campaigning. So he campaigned in the north for almost 2 decades. He led 17 military campaigns, and Susan Wise Bauer says his Egypt stretched almost to the Euphrates, a northern border never matched again. Nobody was able to do this again. So for his battles, he used war chariots, bronze weapons, and these superior tactics. He was really a military genius. He was really, really good at what he did, and he was able to do this. So I'm going to talk about Kadesh. So this is just one specific campaign battle that he had that I thought was interesting that I want to talk to you about. So Kadesh is in Canaan. Okay, I'll show you a map in just a second. But the king of Kadesh organized a group of allies against Egypt. They were like, enough is enough. Let's defeat them. So he gets a group of allies, and the battle happens, and Kadesh and their allies were like, oops, we probably shouldn't have done that, and they retreat very quickly. In the history of the ancient world, Susan Wise Bauer says that they were retreating so quickly they were like hauling each other by the clothes over the walls. The Egyptians stopped to plunder the tents where the people of Kadesh and the allies had been staying, and as they're plundering it, the enemy retreats and they close the door on the city gates. Now, Egypt wasn't well versed in how to defeat walled cities. They didn't have ladders to climb up over into the cities. So they were like, okay, we'll just starve them out. So they starved them out for 7 months. And they win. Susan Wise Bauer says the Egyptians returned home with plunder and treasures, the first booty of the restored army post Hatshepsut. The men who had refused to assassinate Thutmose III, because I'm sure there was some stuff going on there. So the men who had refused to assassinate Thutmose III were rewarded for their pain. So 20 years they had had no military victories, and they had kept Thutmose III safe in the army as, you know, he was sent away, and finally they reap their reward. So here's a map just to show you. Kadesh is right here. Okay, so the campaign in Kadesh frightened people in the country. Semitic warlords began just sending gifts to Egypt. They were trying to make peace with this intense and angry Pharaoh. And I would add probably intense, angry, and bitter. The cities that resisted were attacked and sacked. And here's another story about another city, and again, I just think these are interesting. So Susan Wise Bauer says Joppa on the coast tried to make a deal instead of surrendering unconditionally. According to a later story, the king of Joppa agreed to visit the Egyptian commander in order to discuss peace terms. So the king of Joppa is just like, okay, let's go talk to them. Let's try to negotiate. So he was served a banquet and then was knocked unconscious and stuffed into a back room. The Egyptian commander went out and told the king's charioteer that the Egyptians had decided to surrender to Joppa and that the charioteer should return quickly and tell Joppa's queen that her husband was on his way with prisoners. A procession of captive Egyptians soon appeared on the horizon, carrying baskets of plunder from the Egyptian camp. But each basket contained an armed warrior. When the queen of Joppa threw the gates open, the warriors burst out of their baskets and forced the city to surrender. So, again, he was very good at what he did. So that's the end of talking about Thutmose III. And on to just a little life update. So missed you guys all in class. I hope you had a great time with your substitute teachers. So you guys know that I have COVID and my husband has COVID and I think my son's getting it too. So we're all really tired, but we're fine. And we just got, like you guys know, like we moved into our new house and we've been remodeling and painting, and it's just been this huge thing. As you can see, like there's no pictures hung up in my room. I'm like hiding my desk because it's not even set up and there's like boxes down there. But we just got a new TV, and so I don't even know. I think it's this weather. I have never done this before, but I've just been watching all of these cheesy Netflix Christmas movies and just wholeheartedly enjoying them. I don't know why, guys. Like, I don't know why these cheesy Christmas movies make me so happy. But, yeah, that's what I've been doing. So I just wanted to let you know that, so you don't think I'm like lying at home dying. There were a few days where I felt like that, but mostly better now. So I hope all of you are healthy. All of you are taking your vitamins, drinking water, washing your hands, just doing all the things that you're always told to do, but sometimes get lazy and don't do. Do all of those things. And I hope I'll get to see you guys soon. So yeah, anyway, bye.